Well, it looks like it's 8 o'clock. We'll go ahead and start. Om Amen. Om Amen. Om Amen. Songs of reverence and anguish, a cry from the heart, a voice raised in prayer, a distant flute at night teasing the air with staccato notes of love and despair. These are the music of their reverence, songs of their sweet and dark experience, of exaltation and of deference. Love poems from God. So Heidi asked that I say something about what happened on Thursday, last Thursday. I went to see the cardiologist who is referred to and refers to himself as the electrician, the one who deals with the electrical aspects of the heart. And what he said was, Plan B, because of the characteristics of your heart, Plan B is off the table. But don't worry, we have plans C, D, and E, which they're considering not just among the cardiologists in the Kaiser cardiology unit, but they are now working with and are collegial with the cardiologists of Emory. Now, those of you who know about these things know that Harvard is the Emory of the North. Emory is a preeminent institution, and their cardiologists are among the most highly regarded in the country. And so it's a great good fortune for me that in their discussions among themselves, they will be discussing options C, D, and E regarding what should happen with this heart. And so that being the case, Dr. Aravanian said he would get back to me by the end of this month. We have a telephone telephone appointment scheduled for the end of this month. In the meantime, they have me attending, it's so unfortunately named, but they have me going to the heart failure clinic, which is at the Kaiser facilities over in Gwinnett. So I have one of those appointments tomorrow. My dear sister's driving me over. So that's my report. I'm my primary cardiologist, Dr. Pandya, has adjusted the medications and stopped one and started another and so on. And all of that seems to be working very well. So I'm feeling much better than I had been feeling. So there's something to those allopathic medications. There's no two ways about it. So now we are 8. How wonderful. Cindy, last week you read a scholar, a lawyer, and a priest. Do you feel like reading it again for us so that we can then now discuss it? We're not hearing you, dear.
I know. I was multi-whatevering. I'm having to find it because, oh, there it is. Somehow I got off the page. Okay, I have it now. Okay. A scholar, a lawyer, and a priest. In my travels, I came upon a village that had a new temple built over a big well, but no one could draw water from it without paying a price. I asked about this, and this story was told. 100 years ago, there was a group of boys that would go to the well to swim. That is, all but one would dive from the top, for one was crippled and could only watch. With all his heart, he would wish he was like his friends, that his one arm and leg had not been limp since he was born. One day, when it was especially hot, and he was watching his friends cut up and laugh at the bottom of the well, they all turned to him and stared in awe, as if seeing something miraculous. The crippled boy turned around, and Krishna was standing there smiling wonderfully and said, "It sure is hot today. Climb on my back. We will dive in." And they did. Krishna never came up from the bottom of the well, it is said. And when the child who had been on the back of Krishna came up, he was no longer crippled and remained healed the rest of his life. The fame of the well spread, and many legends and rumors naturally evolved and began to circulate. But the water remained free, and hundreds would travel to drink it and camp there at night and tell the different stories they had heard. The point being, they would be thinking of the Lord and participating in the stories in a way that helped them most. If one unveiled word from God touched this earth, it would ignite like a rag soaked in oil. All we can bear of the truth is hearsay and rumors. In this starving world, what feeds, let feed. Best that many dishes are set before us, and as we become less caged, we will pick wisely, like the golden falcon over fertile plains, like the mountain deer in spring lush valleys. A scholar, a lawyer, and a priest arrived one day, and all pissed in the water, so to speak. What the priest and the scholar wanted the people to believe got printed in books, which they also sold along with the water. And of course, the lawyer made their insanity legal. The water I tasted was sour. I think Krishna left. In this sorrowful world, why tamper with anything that lifts our spirits? So I read it again, or?
No, I think we were all here last week. We
Okay.
read it out 3 times.
Okay.
Thank you. That was a very, very fine reading. Thank you. And what a story, what a morality tale. A tale of a miracle, a tale of the wonderful things that happened as the result of the miracle, as long as no one tampered with it. And then, of course, what in today's language would be called the monetization of the miracle and the well. Every one of these saints, in one way or another, alludes to the tragedy of the commercialization of our being, of our being with one another. The fact that some sort of thugs take charge of things. No one needed to take charge. Everything was going along fine. Anyone else have anything to say about this remarkable poem?
I have a question, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
Um, what does it mean, these two verses? If one unveiled word from God touched this earth, it would ignite like a rack soaked in oil. All we can bear of the truth is hearsay and rumors. So, what is the unveiled God that
The unveiled word of God.
word?
Yeah, Meister Eckhart also mentions this, as does St. Thomas Aquinas, that we as living beings would not be able to stand, would not be able to, and existence itself would not be able to bear the full presence, the unveiled God. God told St. Thomas Aquinas, if I took off my mask, you would run. So the idea, as it seems to me, is that we are therefore caged, as she says, with a reflection, hearsay and rumor. But she says that this hearsay and rumor benefited each of them and lifted them up in their own way. So the scriptures uh, may or may not be the best thing for us, but what we hear from our fellow holy company and what we hear from genuine teachers are those who do not ask for any money for what they do, for what they offer. You may offer them money as a recognition of the fact that they have needs also, but they don't ask for any. So that's how I hear those lines. Does that make sense?
Of course, it does. And also, there is something to be said for these sweet stories. I mean, there are so many about Krishna and Rama and the devotees feeding them and believing when they are told that God will come and eat. And there's some very cute stories, and it does warm the heart.
Yes. There's that wonderful story about the son of a Brahmin priest who the Brahmin priest every day fed cooked food to the deity at noon, at lunchtime. And one day he was suddenly called away. So he told his son, well, you know the mantras. You feed the Lord at lunchtime. Uh, and so um, the boy goes in and presents the food, says the mantras, and waits, and nothing appears to happen. And so he says, Lord, didn't you hear me? Please come take this food. Nothing happens. Finally, he's desperate. He's weeping. He's weeping, saying, Lord, my father will be so upset with me if he finds that when he returns that you haven't taken this food. And so the Lord appears and eats the food. And when his father returns, he said, what happened to the food? There's no prasad. And the boy said, well, you told me to feed the Lord, and I asked him to come, and he came and he ate the food. And his father, of course, was amazed and very pleased. So there are these lovely stories. And these are the rumors and hearsay. And those kinds of stories lift our hearts. They lift our hearts. They feed us. Anything else about that, or anything else having to do with this poem, or anything else that engages you?
I like the part about where is it? Let me find it again. Um, all right, come on. Oh, there it goes. Um, best that many dishes are set before us, and as we become less caged, we will pick wisely. Like this falcon over this fertile plain. I mean, the falcon has its pick of whatever, of everything, but it chooses wisely what is most beneficial to its being. The
As
snail.
does the deer in the lush valley. Yeah.
Right, right, and it made me think of, sitting around and talking and telling stories with lots of people. It's like the older we get, and especially on a spiritual path, the the fewer people we do that with. I
Yeah.
mean, or not so much fewer in number, but there's this I don't know what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
There's this winnowing of the people
yeah,
that
yeah.
we're willing to spend our quality time with. That's why this is such a treasured little group here. We're so honored to be in one another's presence.
And then followed right up by a scholar, a lawyer, and a priest.
Right.
For a little contrast.
Yeah, for a little contrast. Anything else from anyone?
Yes. When the boy was on Krishna's back, and they jumped they dove into the well.
Yeah.
Then it says Krishna never came up again from the bottom of the well. It is said when the child who had been on his back came up. And so when that happened, of course, the boy was not crippled anymore for the rest of his life. And, they didn't charge anything for drinking out of the well. And then, oh gosh, now I lost it. And then he's gone, and then all the kind of bad stuff happens. I'm trying to find where it says that.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I'm still looking for it. Oh yeah, at the bottom, the second to the last stanza, the water I tasted was sour. I think Krishna left. So, I mean, I guess, metaphysically speaking, he was still in the water,
Yes.
and he was
Yes.
just present, for people to, I don't know, drink in the goodness and the glory of whatever was right for them, their needs.
Yes.
And I just kind of like that part.
And we have such places in the Christian tradition. Lourdes is one of them.
Right, exactly. Yes.
And so it's but it's just such a shame what happens with these miraculous places is they become the prisoners of scholars, lawyers, and priests.
Yeah. like you said, it's tainted. It's all about money, and
Right.
it is such a shame, isn't it? You can see that in our modern day too.
Oh, Lord,
That
yes.
story plays out probably more than more than ever now.
Well, we've gotten awfully good at it in this
I guess so, unfortunately.
modern age.
So,
Thank you, Heidi. That's you're right on from here. Anyone else? Anything?
When, when Krishna dives in with the boy on his back, and Krishna doesn't surface, but the boy does, and he's well. Is that comparable to a Christian miracle in the scriptures?
Well, I would read it that way, June. Very much so. I mean, Jesus would do his miracles and then he would sometimes just disappear. He would be in a crowd and they would look around and he had simply disappeared. Of course, from the perspective of mystical experience, the great ones, the Christs, they have all the power that is because they are one with the Father. When Christ says, I am the vine, and to us ye are the branches, he's rooted in the very ground of being from which all power springs. And so he says, if you just have faith, you will do greater things than these. Because there's the ground of being, the roots of oneness, Christ's unity with that, being the vine, the active part, and then ourselves as the branches. And of course, those who've really turned their attention in that direction become capable of miracles. If you remember, Rabia said, I can heal anyone. And Saint Meister Eckhart also talks about having these extraordinary powers of being in two places at one time. And the saints are known to have these miraculous powers. We can see Krishna however we wish. Those from India and other places in the world that believe in him see him as in the same category as Christ. He is an incarnation of God. And certainly in the scripture in which he speaks directly, which is Bhagavad Gita, that's what he says. So he left his essence in the water. He disappeared, did not return in physical form, but he left his essence in the water until it was commercialized. I think it's wonderful how much discussion this poem of Mirabai's produced. June, did that answer your question?
Yes. Yes. But I was thinking too of so many times a sadness comes, and yet something miraculous comes after that sadness. And someone is, someone benefits. I don't like that word, benefits, but someone is made more holy after something sad happens.
Yes. How nicely said. Sometimes it's hard to see in the moment, but it's almost always obvious to us afterwards.
Yes.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, Haima, would you like to read the next poem? I'd call that.
Sure, Brother Shankara. I'd call that. Before I fell asleep last night, I laid awake and wondered, what did I achieve this day? Just roaming around calling his name. So I brought before my mind's eye all who I had been kind to, and it turned out to be all things that I had seen. I'd call that one hell of a productive day.
Read it again, please. It's such a lighthearted and sweet poem.
Yes, it did. I'd call that. Before I fell asleep last night, I laid awake and wondered, what did I achieve this day? Just roaming around calling his name. So I brought before my mind's eye all who I had been kind to, and it turned out to be all things that I had seen. I'd call that one hell of a productive day. So cute. That's so nice.
And I think we'd have to agree with her.
I think so.
If we can manage that, if we can be kind to everyone and everything that we encounter during the day,
Definitely.
yes, what a hell of a productive day.
Yes, definitely. I agree with you, Brother Shankar.
It puts me in mind of Fred Rogers.
Yes,
Fred Rogers said,
he's a legend of
I
kindness.
like you just the way you are. He was kind to everyone.
Yes.
Everyone. And for that matter, if you find out more about his life, essentially to everything he encountered. So I think he had some really productive days.
He made the world so beautiful around him. Every time you see him for that hour or 2 hours, it was just amazingly touching. Every word he said. Yeah, Fred Rogers is really a wonderful person.
So that I only bring that up to highlight the fact that it isn't just Mirabai then. It's Fred Rogers now and others.
Brother
Anyone else
Shankara?
have anything to offer about this one?
Yeah, I'm trying to make a connection between the middle and the last stanza, or the second and the third. What did I achieve this day? Just roaming around calling his name. So it looks like, on the one hand, all she did was call Krishna's name, and then trying to figure out what did I achieve, and then it she brought to her mind's eye the ones that she'd been kind to.
Every she brought to her mind's eye everyone that she had encountered,
And
everyone and everything she encountered.
right. So does it imply that she saw Krishna in everybody? Um,
Well,
did she,
one could certainly draw that conclusion, knowing what underlies the the idea of calling on Krishna's name always. That she's, but I don't think it's a direct link in the poem. From here, that's how it seems to me. She just, but what it said to me was that just keeping the divine in mind constantly not only allows but promotes this feeling and attitude of kindness. So whether she was actively seeing Krishna in each and everything, um, she certainly was treating it with the kindness that she would treat the divine person. So whether it's a direct or indirect connection, I think it's interesting that you that you found this the what she alighted, what she brought together, calling Krishna's name and then being kind all day long to everything she encountered.
I mean, there's certainly something about Krishna that um, the gopis and the cowherds were willing to give up everything and run at the slightest suggestion that he was around or the sound of his flute. And even when he
Yes.
left Gokul and he went to Dwarka and never came back, they never lamented that he didn't come back. They still would run whenever they thought that he was there. So it's something,
Well, some stories of that sweet interplay between Krishna and those cowmaids and cowherds talks about what you just said, and other tellings of this story said they wept and lamented greatly, particularly Radha, his beloved. So there are many stories. Uh, which ones appeal to our hearts? Uh, as June said, uh, sadness, if we watch carefully, is followed by something else. And so, but in tracking back to this poem, uh, I just love it that the way she concludes it. Just in this lighthearted way. I'd call that a hell of a productive day. That I was able to be kind and in the spirit of in that divine spirit with everyone that I encountered. Anyone else? Anything about this poem before we go on?
Yeah, I would like to comment.
Please, Heidi.
I love that last line too. And I think being, that positive energy that it's like a force field, that she's
Yes.
out around her. And I used to have a teacher who would say, gosh, if 1 or 2% of the population just meditated, just think how different our world would be, And so instead of spewing negative stuff, all this positive, love and kindness is being to just everything, every critter, everything out there. So yeah, that is a pretty damn productive day, I would say.
Yes, indeed. And I love your use of the word force field. I'm sure if we were in Mirabai's physical presence, that's exactly what we would feel. That force field. Anything else, Heidi? That was beautiful.
That's all. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Yes, we can all aspire to have that productive a day. Swayam, would you be so kind as to read Mira Knows Why?
Sure. Mira knows why. The earth looked at him and began to dance. Mira knows why, for her soul too is in love. If you cannot picture God in a way that strengthens you, you need to read more of my poems. Mira knows why. The earth looked at him and began to dance. Mira knows why, for her soul too is in love. If you cannot picture God in a way that strengthens you, you need to read more of my poems. I'll let June speak.
What made you laugh, June?
Uh, the fact that she's or he is not pondering, but is a little lighthearted there.
Yeah, even saucy, you know. She's just a little saucy with us. I agree with you. It's sweet. But there's a very profound message here. If you cannot picture God in a way that always strengthens you, something needs to happen. And of course, then she saucily says, you need to read more of my poems. And you know, Rumi says the same thing. Hafiz says the same thing. St. Francis of Assisi says the same thing in a very different way. But that's what he says. He says, don't ask me what happened in Rome. Let me tell you what happened. So, yes.
And don't you think these two poems, again, are, placed side by side
Oh, yes.
perfectly?
Absolutely, Heidi. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is the thing about our wonderful friend and fellow reader and interpreter, Ladinsky. He is very intentional. He selected from God knows how many pieces of work of each of these saints. You know, this was a years-long project, and so yes, there is a through line, no question, in my mind anyway, and it showed up in yours as well. And you know, it's her lighthearted but very truthful, very truthful way of being with.
I wish I could write something like that.
Oh, June, you could. You just need to get out the pen and do it. You've written some beautiful things. You have so much in your heart. It's just a matter of marrying the inspiration with craft. And you're articulate. Your Circles of Glass poem proves it, absolutely. Whether you want to take your time that way, whether you really want to do it enough to take your time that way, I think all of us would be very interested to hear anything that you did write, that you brought to a point where you felt like you wanted to present it to us. I think we'd all be very interested and delighted to hear it. And having been in your presence a little bit, June, I know that you can be very saucy too. And it's fun. It's fun. I hope that each one of us here can be that kind of saucy.
But June, no pressure though. No pressure, June.
Well, I hope it didn't. I hope it didn't come across as pressure. Just an invitation. There's no pressure.
Just a sweet, sweet invitation and reminder. Thank you, Shank.
You're most welcome, dear. Anything else about this poem that ends, you need to read more of my poems? Okay, well, that's the last of Mira's poems. We now go on to the amazing Saint Teresa of Avila. I mean, they're all amazing. Saint Teresa of Avila is truly a force of nature and one of the great Christian saints. Saint Teresa of Avila. I found completeness when each breath began to silently say the name of my Lord. I found completeness when each breath began to silently say the name of my Lord, which again echoes what Mira was saying when she went the whole day through calling the name of the Lord, each breath saying the name of the Lord. Heidi, would you be willing to read to us the biography of Teresa?
I certainly would.
Oh, that'd be delightful.
I love that line you just read. It's so beautiful.
Yes.
So I'll skip that because you just read it twice, okay?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Saint Teresa of Avila. Teresa of Avila, 1515 to 1582, is undoubtedly the most influential female saint in the Western world, and she has made great contributions to spiritual literature and poetry. She was a woman of tremendous courage who is rightfully credited with remarkable political and religious reform achieved against the strongest and most insidious chauvinistic forces. A realistic picture of Teresa's life did not even reach the English reading general public until the 1960s. She was known to have a remarkable quick wit and a stunning, even provocative sense of humor, as well as great physical beauty. Her complete works include 7 books, 450 letters, and assorted poetry. Her Her writings are considered masterpieces of mystical prose and verse. She personally founded 17 Carmelite convents and 2 monasteries, despite enormous opposition from the church and other men in power. Teresa was born in Avila, a beautiful high mountain village of the Sierra de Grados. She was one of 13 children, 3 girls and 10 boys, in a wealthy family. The Spain in which Teresa grew up was permeated with 700 years of Arabian culture. The eradication of Arab power was followed by one of Spain's darkest periods, the insanity of the Inquisitions, which, in the 14th century, along with other grievous deeds, forced mass conversions of Jews to Christianity. Conversos, as they were called, were a continually persecuted minority with special taxes, inclusion from church or military professions, and even service in the New World. At this time, most young males sought to make their fortune in the New World, as did 9 of Teresa's 10 brothers. Teresa's grandfather, a wealthy wool and silk merchant, had actually reclaimed his Jewish ancestry, partly for business reasons. The aristocracy protected and even intermarried with Jews, although the family had been conversos for over 100 years. However, before the end of the 14th century, the entire Semitic atmosphere in Toledo, where the family then lived, became so extreme that Teresa's father, Alonso Sanchez, moved the family to Avila and aspired to live the life of the Hidalgo class, giving up his family's cloth trade and living off the savings. Inflation was rampant because of the great quantities of gold and silver brought in from the New World, and by the time Alonso Sanchez died, his family was bankrupt. Teresa was her father's favorite child and the most spirited. Her mother died during childbirth when Teresa was 13, after which she had little supervision. It is believed she had a lover at the age of 15, which caused her father to send her to a convent boarding school, only to see her return home 2 years later because of poor health. When she was 21, Teresa ran away from home to join a convent. At that time, many convents were more like hotels for women, allowing them a great deal more independence than they would be allowed at home. Though after 2 years at the convent, Teresa had a near-death experience that changed her life. A spiritual awakening began, in which she cultivated a system of meditation that sought quieting the mind to such an extent that God could then be heard speaking. Over the next 20 years, she experienced many mystical states, but not until she was 50 did she begin the most far-reaching aspects of her life's work. Teresa had a great desire to learn, and when the Inquisition in 1559 forbade women to read, Teresa turned to God and asked him to teach her soul about divine love. She then began to write completely out of her own experience. Many of her poems are, in fact, intimate accounts of her communication with God. The church's persecution of Teresa had not waned when she passed away and was buried in Alba de Tormes in 1582. A year after her death, some of her disciples, feeling that she might have wished to be buried in Avila, had her body exhumed. When her body was found to be perfectly intact and emitting a wonderful fragrance, her sainthood was formally decreed, allowing the publication and preservation of some of her works. Most of what we see today of Teresa's work is probably reined way back, for her writings fell into the hands and under the control of the very forces that had so opposed her throughout her life. With this in mind, the versions that follow attempt to portray a hopefully more genuine account of her astounding relationship with God. Read it again?
No, dear.
No? Okay.
I think that's
That's good.
enough. I mean, I think we were all being attentive. That was my subjective experience of what was coming from the screen. Anything anyone would like to say about Saint Teresa?
Brother Shankara, I never thought convents were that easygoing in those days. I thought they were stricter than home. It seems like they were much easier on women.
Well, the ones that Saint Teresa started were more strict and did follow a rule. Uh, the reason for what is remarked on here, that they're being sort of hotels for women, was that they were a way for the family to just put a child away and give them to God, which was expected of Catholics, still is. That one of the children will be given to God, as it were. It's not as actively practiced now, but but you'll notice that they weren't very well run. She came home after 2 years in poor health, in part because of the food was bad, the conditions weren't very sanitary, they weren't well cared for. They were just a way for parts of the church to make money. And so this is what was part of her reform movement, and also St. John of the Cross, to make these places more conducive to spiritual growth, rather than just warehouses for unwanted children.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. That was good explanation.
And you'll notice that what Ladinsky says is she was sent there because she was being spirited. She had a lover when she was 15.
I know.
Which certainly should indicate to us that being spirited is not a disqualification for sainthood.
Yes, that's right.
Anything else from anyone about what was written about Saint Teresa?
It says here that she cultivated a system of meditation that sought quieting the mind. Do we know anything about the system that she?
Yes, it's in her autobiography. If you read her autobiography, you will see, and it very much mirrors what is in. If you remember in Mirabai, she was told by this great sage, "Become so quiet that you can hear the blood running in your veins." Well, though Saint Teresa of Avila uses different words, that's exactly what this is her method generated that And it had to do with the repetition of God's name, which we're very familiar with. And that's why Ladinsky started this little biographical sketch with that quote from her poem. When I became complete or perfect, when with each breath, I uttered God's name, or whatever the exact words are. Does anyone have that? They can reference quickly what the exact words are. Just that couplet that starts the.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Please do read it, Heidi.
I found completeness when each breath began to silently say the name of my Lord.
There you are. Now, that is an encapsulation of her method. And in the tradition that I come from and Swayam practices, this is called japam, or repetition of the divine name. And it is, interestingly, it was also being taught halfway around the world by a man named Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at precisely the same time that she was alive. Now, that doesn't mean there was any influence of one on the other in any direct way. It simply means that that's how strongly this spiritual current was running at that time for that way of being with the divine name. The Chaitanya's prayer opens this way: chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. This was what he was teaching at precisely the same time that Mirabai was alive. Not Mirabai, Saint Teresa of Avila. Saint Teresa of Avila. So anything else about her and what was said about her before we go on to her work?
Well, I like that last paragraph. Most of what we see today of Teresa's work is probably reined way back, and so he tries to, give us a little more of a genuine account of what her astounding relationship with God was like. So,
And yes, and we will see in her poems just how astounding it was. And this is one of those things where if we're going to read these poems, at least tentatively, we need to have the faith that they're telling us the absolute truth. Until we know it in our hearts, that's a different kind of faith. But to have the tentative or working faith that these things were told by them about themselves and their relationship with the divine is the truth as they experienced it and understood it when they wrote these things. So, just wondering who should read. I will just say this. Cindy, do you feel like doing that?
Sure, it's 1 minute till 9, so maybe.
Yeah. Well, we'll just read it again,
Okay.
again next week with
Sure.
that.
Okay, I will just say this. We bloomed in spring. Our bodies are the leaves of God. The apparent seasons of life and death our eyes can suffer. But our souls, dear, I will just say this forthright. They are God Himself. We will never perish unless He does. You read it again?
Please.
I will just say this. We bloomed in spring. Our bodies are the leaves of God. The apparent seasons of life and death our eyes can suffer. But our souls, dear, I will just say this forthright. They are God Himself, and we will never perish unless He does.
I think that's a nice way to end tonight's gathering. So until next week, dears, how sweet, how sweet. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. May you go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the divine being as our mother and father. Any other final words from anyone? All right, dears. Until next Monday, where we'll start with this remarkable poem. Good night.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
Good night.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
one.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
You're most welcome, dear. Thank you to all of you.
God bless.
And now a little message to Cindy. And now for some ice cream.